Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the MBOM podcast. I'm Amanda and I'll be your host for this and all episodes of the show. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by FavYogis. Do you teach privately? Make payment and registration a breeze. Use the FavYogis app to create and manage classes for your personal clients. Life is just easier with autopay. You can forget about remembering to Venmo, or if you're up in Canada, sending an invoice, an e-transfer, or PayPal, depending on where your clients are in the world. With FavYogis, you can use autopay to enable repeating payments. This will save you so much time and make things so much easier. You can also keep your calendars in sync. Google Calendar integration automatically updates teacher and student classes when you make changes. It's still just your yoga. Teachers add classes, students add teachers and students stay connected. Head on over to the App Store and find FavYogis, FavYogis. Use code MBOM and let them know that I sent you. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you in part by OfferingTree. When you're a yoga teacher and you're trying to build your digital presence, it can be daunting. First, you might need a website. There are a lot of great tools for building websites like WordPress, Wix, and Squarespace. Then you need a way to email your students. Again, there are tools for that like MailChimp and Constant Contact. But that's another account to pay for and another password to remember. Then you need a way to schedule and register your students. Again, there are tools for that, but it's another account to create and pay for and another password to remember. Oh wait, how do I integrate my scheduling tool with my website? Arrgh! Instead of putting all of this stuff off for another day because it's too daunting, let me tell you about a better way. OfferingTree set out to make creating your digital presence fun, easy, and affordable. With one account, you can create a website in minutes that has your schedule built right in. They also have email marketing tools to collect email addresses, send newsletters, and automated emails to your subscribers. It all works seamlessly together with one account and one subscription. To learn more about what OfferingTree can do for your digital presence, visit offeringtree.com/MBOM. OfferingTree has been supporting MBOM for close to a year now, and not only are they really changing the game for yoga teachers, making yoga business easy, they're also just really awesome people. They're a small business just like me, probably just like you, and I love that when I get to meet with them, I'm talking right with the co-founders. They're in it every single day, busting their butts to make a product that's really great, and I feel that when I use it. OfferingTree is providing special pricing for MBOM listeners, so be sure to visit offeringtree.com/MBOM to receive your discount. I am also super excited to announce a brand new partnership with Mind Body Online. You know the saying, people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel? That's true, both in our personal lives and in our business lives. MindBody is a company that knows every customer interaction is a chance for your business to shine and for you to help your customers thrive. With that simple truth in mind, MindBody has spent nearly 20 years sweating the details of what it looks like to design and run an extraordinary fitness or wellness business. From offering simple and seamless booking to being able to greet a new customer by name to the email that lands in their inbox with a great offer, they obsess over finding ways to allow you to craft a thoughtful, meaningful experience for your customers. Because they know it's the experience that makes a difference for you and your customers. Find out more about MindBody at mindbodyonline.com/pod. That's POD. Once again, it's mindbodyonline.com/pod. All right, on to today's episode of the podcast. I am very, very excited to be joined by Kendrick Shope. And Kendrick is the CEO and creator of the Authentic Selling Process. She's a sales expert, a speaker, a media personality, and mama to a beautiful little girl. And on this episode, Kendrick and I dive into so much about selling. And I know this is a topic that I've approached a ton of different ways on a ton of different episodes, but it is so important. We talk about this right at the beginning, but sales is really so much more than just marketing your products or getting your offerings out there. It's how we interact with the world. It's job interviews, it's teaching demos, it's talking to people after classes. And I know that maybe that feels a little bit weird to box into selling, but it is all a part of it. So on this episode, Kendrick and I talk about why sales doesn't have to be icky, how we can start selling ourselves and our services more authentically and really feel good about the sales that we're doing. She shares her authentic sales process, how we can make it more about the customers and not ourselves, why knowing how to sell as an entrepreneur is so important, and so much more. This is a really, really insightful conversation, and I really hope you guys enjoy it. So without further ado, here is Kendrick. Kendrick, welcome to the podcast today. I'm super excited to have you here with me.
Thank you. I am so equally as excited to be here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm stoked to be talking with you. And first question, where are you joining me from today?
I am calling from Bentonville, Arkansas.
Okay. Where in Arkansas is that? I've driven like the main highway, I think like Highway 6 through Arkansas, but that's all.
Yeah, so it's in the northwest corner. It's literally like 10 minutes from Oklahoma, 10 minutes from Missouri. It is just right up in the corner. The Bentonville's claim to fame, it's a little bit like a bubble, is where Walmart was founded. So it is the home of Walmart, and the area is very what I would call un-Arkansas. So it is not like the rest of the state because they're the largest, let's see if I can say this right, the largest subset of Fortune 500 companies anywhere in the world is right here in Bentonville, Arkansas. So they can all be next to Walmart.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. So interesting.
Yeah.
Learning new stuff about Arkansas.
Seriously, it is. We moved here about 6 years ago, and I'm just like, I had no idea about any of this stuff. But, you learn a lot when you live here for 6 years.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing. So I'm curious, can you tell me your background with falling in love with sales and deciding to become, a sales expert? Like where did you first become excited about doing this sales thing?
Yeah, I wish I could say I fell in love with it and knew immediately, like a lot of people seem to have in their background story or their why story. That wasn't necessarily true for me. So I've always been good at selling, and when I say always, I mean back to when I was a child. And you remember those? You'd do a mathathon or something, and you'd at school, and you'd sell spots, and you'd try to win the prize, the jam box or whatever. You may be too young to remember jam boxes, but the prize.
Yeah.
And I was always really good at that. But I don't know that I graduated from college and was like, I want to go out and sell. I kind of fell into it. I sold lumber for a Fortune 500 company. That's about as exciting for me as watching paint dry, but I was good at it. And then I transitioned into pharmaceutical sales. So I sold for about a decade and graduated top of my class from 2 corporate sales schools. And then after I had my daughter, and I think this is really my big why, and it's why I fell in love with selling. After I fell in love with my daughter, I realized that I was telling her every night, you can be anything you want to be. All you have to do is believe. And I was like, you know what? She's going to ask me if I wanted to be a pharmaceutical salesperson, if that was my dream, and I was going to have to tell her no. And so all this believe stuff was just going to be kind of horse crap, if you will. So that's when I decided to start my own business and realized through a series of spiritual and universal nudging that selling was what I could teach in a way that nobody taught it and was kind of my gift to teach. It's really not about selling. Selling is the tools, right? Selling provides you the tools to make money, to get more customers. But at the end of the day, it's about doing what you love to do. It provides the tool for you to get there. And that's what I love about selling.
Amazing. I am really excited to dive into that aspect of it because that's also my belief around selling. And I definitely know that that's something that yoga teachers struggle with. So that'll be great. But before we get there, can you tell me about taking this leap of faith and recognizing okay, this isn't my dream. What is my dream? And going out and actually creating that. What was that like with, having a young daughter, a family, going out and doing that?
It was super unglamorous. So everybody talks about the glamour and the Instagram worthy, except Instagram, I don't think even existed back then. Maybe it did, but the Instagram worthy lifestyle. And It's unglamorous. I mean, there were days, so I quit a 6-figure job. I blew through our savings. My husband and I were, my husband was scared to death because I was like, I'm following my dream. And he's like, you're sending us to the poorhouse. And I'm like, but I'm following my dream. So we weren't aligned. There were days when I didn't shower. There were days when I felt like I was crawling through the mud uphill, just trying to get traction. I don't think enough people talk about that. And in the end, it's the second to having my daughter, the best decision I have ever made. It's all worth it, but it wasn't glamorous. You know, when I decided to do this, I worked my job for about another 6 months, and I was up at 3 a.m. I'd work all day, I'd spend time with my family, and then I would set an alarm and get up at 3 a.m. and start writing copy. I'm not saying that's the road for everybody and that's the path for everybody, but it wasn't glamorous and it was hard. And I don't think enough people talk about the unglamorous side of it. In the end, like I said, one of the best things I've ever done for myself, for my family, but it was hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for keeping it real. I'm all about the realities of those types of things. And, as much as I love social media, I think it is really important for people to know like the hustle that goes on behind the scenes and the things that are really challenging and the moments where it's like, life was a lot easier with a 9-to-5 that paid me every 2 weeks type.
Yes, absolutely. In some way, I mean, certainly until you make money, it's a lot more reliable to have a paycheck and insurance and all that stuff coming in. It's very important to balance out that scale and say, and on the other side, all the hard work and all the unglamorous, again, I've said it, but it's completely worth it. But it's not one of those things, at least it wasn't for me, and I've never seen it be for one person, where you get inspired and you figure out that you want to do more, that you are here to hopefully leave a global impact. And then the next day you go off and you start doing that. And it just is, it doesn't happen like that. There's a lot between point A and point C.
Absolutely. And how long was it for you before you felt like you kind of maybe got to the top of that mountain that you were climbing? Like, I guess, I mean, you trying to convince clients to come to you versus like clients just coming to you and you having to do a little bit less of that like outreach.
I made an agreement, if you will. This sounds extremely out there, but I made an agreement with my business when I started. I didn't know I was doing it. So I've learned this in hindsight after I've gotten a little bit more spiritual, because I was all in my head when I started this business. That's one of the best parts about starting a business, right? You get introduced to all these self-development tools, and it's, what do people say? It's the best path to self-improvement that you'll ever find. Or maybe not self-improvement, but self-awareness. So I made an agreement with my business when I started. The agreement with my business was, I want to show my daughter that she can do anything in this world if she puts her mind to it, if she believes, and if she does the work for it. Work, that may not be exactly right, does the work for it, but the key there is believing. And so I feel like I honored that agreement. That agreement was met a few years ago when I was fortunate enough to be on the Steve Harvey show, and she got to come with me, and she got to go to the green room, and she got to see all this, the glamour of national television or the not glamour. And I remember looking at her and saying, this has been mommy's dream. I dreamed of being on TV my whole life, and I took a real unconventional route to get here. But look, it happened for a girl from Tennessee, a town of 4,000 people. I made it happen, and you can make anything happen too. And so in that moment, and it wasn't about necessarily getting on national TV, but it was just about her being there with me in that moment. In that moment, I felt like the agreement with the business had been honored, and it was time for a new agreement. That's when I feel like I reached the top of the mountain. Now I was already super successful at that point by terms of sales school had hit, 7 figures, and we were making money and customers were coming. But it was more about the agreement that I made with the business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like I think too, it sounds a lot like your kind of viewpoint on sales. Like I love that on your website, like the first thing you see is sales without sacrificing 1 ounce of integrity, which I'd love to dive into. But I feel like that's kind of what I'm hearing you say is this idea of like, yes, your business was successful monetarily and with the revenue and with the clients, but you had made an agreement that was like a little bit deeper, like with yourself and the business.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, we had monetary numbers. I mean, I used to have on my whiteboard in my old office $1 million in revenue by 40, and I was driven. Like if you talk to people who were my colleagues and who knew me, they were like, I was obsessed with that number. Too obsessed. $1 million by 40. $1 million by 40. Well, we hit $1 million by 40. I nearly killed myself in the process, but we hit $1 million in revenue by 40 by the time I was 40. But it that was a great moment for me. Because once we hit that, I was like, oh, now what? And that's because I still hadn't honored the real agreement that I'd made with my business. I guess to answer your question too, from a financial perspective, how long did it take? It took me a lot less time than it took a lot of people from the financial aspect. I think to be full transparency, I was really good at selling. So I needed to learn how to do all the other things related to an online business. I needed to learn how to get a website up or pay somebody to get a website up and get involved and create offers. But I was good at selling. So it took me about a year before I hit that first elusive 6 figures everybody talks about. I also worked my rear end off. So I did 100 free sessions. I let 300 people into sales school for free.
Wow.
And that created a lot of traction in the business.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. Congrats on reaching those goals. I'm curious. You mentioned like you almost killed yourself getting to this big goal that you had of making, 7 figures by the time you were 40. I think that's what you said. Would you, if you could go back, like knowing what you know now, would you still want to make that goal?
That nobody has ever asked me that question. Yeah, I would. And here's why. I learned so much. So on the other side of that goal, it's easy to say, right? I'm 2 years beyond that goal now. So I'm 42 and I learned so much and it forced me. Sometimes I need to have like a ton of bricks dropped on my head to take real notice of areas that need attention in my life. It forced me to take attention and correct some things that really I was doing wrong in the business as far as running the business. So as hard as it was, and as many nights as I cried my eyes out and thought, I'm done, I'm closing the doors, I would still make the goal because of what has happened on the other side of it. It's been beautiful.
Cool. I love that. Yeah, I was just curious because sometimes we're like, okay, knowing what I know now, I do things differently. But I also believe that, things happen exactly as they're meant to, which it sounds like it did with that, which is really, really amazing.
Yeah, I'm still perplexed by that question. I'm like, isn't that interesting? It was so hard, but I said I wouldn't change it. So yeah, I'm still sort of like processing that myself.
I love it. So I'm curious, I think, you've touched on a couple of things that I think are really important when it comes to running a business and sales in general. And I think, one of them is being really good at what you do. I think that's, one of the things that's really key for running a successful business, because like you can hire somebody else out to do those other things to get you started, like an accountant, a lawyer, a web designer, et cetera, but you have to be good at like what you're doing. So I think that's a really important thing that came from that for me. And then the other one is, I think your sales process sounds like something that's very like sits very well, which is going to get into our topic of sales not being icky. But I'm kind of curious, like what your mentality around sales is and how you kind of approach sales with this idea of keeping your integrity.
The first thing is too many people say, I hate selling. Too many people say, that's a judgment. I probably shouldn't say it that way, but too many people come to me and say, I feel like selling is icky, sleazy, slimy, gross, bully, pushy. I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to, some people are even self-aware enough to know I don't really like rejection. I don't want to deal with rejection. Nobody likes rejection, by the way. So I think that we have to find a way to make selling not be any of those things. So if you are engaging in any activity that feels icky, sleazy, slimy, gross, pushy, like you're getting rejected all the time, you're not going to get the results you want from a practical standpoint as well as an energetic standpoint. So the first thing about selling, and what I love about authentic selling, is that it's fluid or it's flexible. So it's not super rigid. It is a very much a step-by-step process, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, but it is pliable, meaning that there are 9,452 different ways to do step 1. So you learn this tool called your guardrail, and then if it feels gross to you, then we find another way. There are 9,252,000 ways to do step 2. Of course, I'm exaggerating here, but just because there's steps, the steps are like the box or the parameters we want to stay in. For example, 50. You can double the amount of sales you close by adding a follow-up process to your sales strategy. There are a gazillion ways to follow up. It should never feel icky, sleazy, slimy, or gross. So the step is you've got to follow up. The fluid part comes from let's make follow-up feel like you're helping and like you're assisting your potential customer rather than pushing something on them. And that's my philosophy. Is there are some sales absolutes without a doubt, but if we can find a way to make it feel like you're helping rather than pushing, like when someone says maybe not right now, they really mean maybe not right now, and it has nothing to do with you, that they're going to they're likely to turn into a potential client later, then we've won, because selling allows you to go out and get what you want. Selling's not just for businesses. We sell anytime we are trying to get something we want, get our kid in a certain class, ask for money for a church function. That's all selling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much good stuff in there. And I think that this it makes me feel like selling is like a really natural thing for yoga teachers, yet it's like we don't like thinking about the fact that we're selling because it does feel icky. But I think especially when you're selling something that's like encouraging people to feel better in their bodies and healing them, I feel like, it should be like a natural sort of way of selling. So I'm curious, for people who are very much like, nope, don't want to be like the greasy car salesman trying to upsell on the leather seats. Like, how do you start to shift your mindset towards sales not being icky?
So the first thing is to think about why we think of it as icky. And I don't mean go into the story of when someone, because we've all got a rotten sales story to tell. I don't mean when somebody, was that icky salesman to you. But let's look at the actual black and white textbook definition of the word selling. And that definition is the exchange of money for a product or service. So nowhere in there does it say you have to be pushy, you have to be icky, you have to be slimy, you have to be sleazy. It's the exchange of money for a product or service. So we get to choose what we do with that, right? But the ickiness comes from our own experience with an icky salesperson. And so we choose how we show up in the world every day. We choose the thoughts that we want to believe, and we get to choose how we want to sell. And so knowing that selling is the exchange of money for a product or service, and that it doesn't have to be icky, is the first step. The next step then is learning how to make selling feel like helping. And at any time, if you are engaging in a process to sell yoga, to sell whatever, and it doesn't feel like helping, stop. Let's find another way to do it. Let's find a better way to do it. And people may be saying, well, I don't know how to do that. That's okay, I do. So the biggest thing is realizing selling, nowhere is it written that it has to be icky. And the second thing is selling can and should, even though we don't like to use that word, feel like helping. If it doesn't stop, don't press on. Let's figure out how to make it feel like helping.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And so, say I'm a yoga teacher who is teaching group classes, and then I have a student kind of approach me about maybe doing some privates, and we're having a conversation about that. And I know like very deeply within myself that I could help them feel better in their body and help them deal with something that they're working on. But they're kind of doing this like, oh, I'm not too sure. I don't know about the cost. How do you kind of approach that with the authenticity and without becoming that like, no, but you need this type thing? like how do you find that balance of like convincing versus forcing?
So the first thing is, and there's a lot to unpack in that scenario. So the first thing is, you can't convince or force anybody to do anything. So we give ourselves too much credit, I think, by saying, oh, well, I'm going to push somebody into something that they don't want to do. Actually, no, we're selling to adults, so probably not. But if somebody says, okay, so the first thing is, how do we turn it around and make it about the customer? So this is going to sound really harsh in light of everything that I've said, but it's not about money. People say all the time, it's really expensive. That's not actually an objection. Like okay, great. It may be expensive for them. They're not saying I can't afford it. But if somebody says I can't afford it, here's the thing. And again, this sounds really harsh, but it's true. 9 out of 10 times, at least in the modern world, people pay for what they value. We pay $1,000 for cell phones. We have guest rooms in our house on the chance that somebody might come and spend the night and need a place to stay. We have multiple cars. We have multiple TVs. We take trips all over the world. We invest in our self-care. All of those things, you're like, well, yeah, that's, of course, people pay for what they value. And so when somebody says to you, I'd like to do this, but I don't know, it's expensive, or I don't know if I have the money. What they're essentially saying is, I'm not sold on the value that this delivers, or I'm not sold that this is going to get me where I want to go, and I'm not willing to take the risk. Okay, well, that's good news for us, because the last thing we want as people who are selling in a way that is helping is for someone to pay us money if they're unsure that we're the person that can get them where we want to go. So I can't afford it, I'm not sure about the money is actually redirection. It's not rejection. It's redirection back to, what are you trying to accomplish? Can I get them there? Yes or no? And so the steps for that are, when somebody says, well, it's expensive or I can't afford it, step number 1 is, thank you for sharing that with me. What most people are used to when they hear I can't afford it is for us to leap on them and say, well, if it was really valuable to you and if you valued your health, you'd find a way. Well, gross. I don't need you to scold me. I'm a grown adult. That doesn't work. So thanks for sharing that with me. I mean, think about this from an energetic standpoint. I've just said I can't afford it. That's not an easy thing to share. Whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. I believe it. So thanks for sharing that with me. The next step is to have empathy. It's what we call tactical empathy. It is a tool taught by the FBI hostage negotiations team, and it is tactical empathy. I understand how it feels to want to take private yoga lessons and feel like you can't afford it. Right? So we're not jumping on them. We're saying we understand. So step 1, thank you for sharing that with me. Step 2 is tactical empathy. I understand how it feels. The key there is we did not say, I understand you can't afford it, because that would make us a bad person. I understand you can't afford it, but I'm going to keep selling. I understand how it feels to want to take private yoga lessons, but feel like it's not in the budget, like it's too expensive. We've all been there before. We've all seen something that we wanted to do that could impact our health, our life, our business, our weight, and feel like we can't afford it. And then there are these 7 tools for handling objections, and you get to choose which one you want to use. So I'll give you an example of one here. One of those is, you compliment them. So you say something like, you've been coming to class. Of course, it has to be genuine. You've been coming to class here for a while, and one of the things I love is how you show up and how you give them a compliment. Whatever it is you can deem from somebody in a yoga class. You remind me a little bit of one of my private clients who was kind of dabbling with the idea of taking private lessons, but wasn't sure that she had the budget. What that same client would tell you is, on the other side of that investment, it's one of the best things she's ever done for herself, because number 1, number 2, number 3, I don't know what those answers are, but yoga teachers will. More peace, more help, I don't know. So when you're ready, reach back out, and I would love to have the conversation about how we can get started with private yoga lessons. So you're leaving the ball in their court. Now, what you want to do after that is follow up with them. So if you can get their email address and you can say, hey, just checking in on you. You crossed my mind today. How's it going? Have you given any more thoughts to private yoga lessons? Let me know what questions you have. You will close those clients because you are approaching it from a place of helping and you're not pushing. So essentially, if we unpack that, number 1, thanks for sharing that with me. Number 2, you understand how it feels. Number 3, you compliment and you tell a story. You remind me of somebody who felt the same way. What we're essentially saying, this is called discounting the objection, is she or he found a way, even though they thought it was too expensive, but we don't say that. We get an email address so we can send them some free resource, so we can something, and then we check in with them later. Does that make sense? That's a lot. That's like 2 weeks worth of sales school packed into like a 5-minute answer.
No, I love it. That definitely makes sense. And I think I love like right from the beginning, because I think that especially with yoga and as a yoga teacher, like so many yoga teachers became teachers because they had a really impactful experience with yoga. And I think the instinct is to go like, oh, but it's going to be so great for you. Like if you can afford this like iPhone XS, like of course you can afford private yoga lessons. And so I love like for that very first step of empathizing with them and understanding, instead of just trying to like throw the value in their faces. Because I think
that
that's
doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I mean, well, let me back up. It can work if it's energetically aligned with you. But what happens for most people is that's not energetically aligned. So they're doing that. You may know this in your core. You may know if you can afford the iPhone, whatever, then you can afford private yoga lessons. You really cannot afford not to do this. But that's preaching, and people don't respond well to that unless you happen to be one of the few percentages of people in the population who can get away with that. And most yoga teachers are not that. They're heart-centered. They're connected to their soul and their solar plexus, and it needs to feel like a hug rather than like a bulldozer.
Absolutely. And I think too, for a lot of people, they get frustrated right at that first step. Like maybe they don't say it out loud, but they're like at least thinking it in their head, like, but you're going to feel so good after you do this. Like, this, you've done the class. Like, why won't you spend the money when you spend money on, I see you at the local coffee shop every day buying a latte, like buy a couple less lattes and do a session with me.
Yep. And also I think what happens for us as sellers is we're like, oh, here we go again. Somebody who doesn't see the value, somebody who can't pay it. Nobody's ever going to pay me. Like we go into our own story too, which doesn't do us any good.
Absolutely. I'm curious in the sales process, if somebody's saying, I can't afford it, do you ever discount your rates, or do you stick pretty hard to like the prices that you've set for the offerings that you have?
We have a no discount policy as a company. So I don't discount. I feel great about that. That is not a hard and fast rule for every single business. You're the CEO, you get to decide. For me, I like things clean. I don't feel good about discounting for one and not discounting for the other 99 people who found a way to pay. And so that's what I say. Thanks for sharing that with me. I understand what it's like to want to take private yoga lessons and feel like the way to afford it is to do it at a discounted rate. As much as I would love to see you reap the benefits from these private lessons, like better health, better whatever, it's out of integrity. That's the key sentence for me to discount. Because if I do it for one person, my heart wants to do it for everybody else, and I'm not in a financial place to do that. So as much as I love you, I love working with you, I know how this is going to change your life, it's just out of integrity for me to do so.
I love that. I feel like you said that like so much easier than I feel like I've ever had. It's so hard, like when you're in that silent moment of them just deciding, and then it comes back with like, I can't afford it. I feel like that's like one of the hardest moments, at least for me in sales, is like, okay, well, I know you're going to feel good about this. So, I guess I could do it a little bit cheaper for you. Like, would that work? But yeah, it's tough.
But you're kind of doing them a disservice. Like I feel like, and I'm not saying don't discount. You can have a no discount rule and then decide to discount. I mean, that's fine. But I feel like you're kind of doing them a disservice because they're not really seeing the full value. If they're asking for a discount, they may be trying to find a way to make it work. But I don't feel like saying, sure, I'll take $100 off the private lesson for you. And I don't feel like that's our job. It's fine for them to ask, but I feel like that does them a little bit of a disservice by saying, well, sure, I don't know. It just gets, it just gets messy in my head, and I don't like messy. So it's super clean for me to say, I get it. I understand. I've seen, this is not a good example for a yoga teacher, but I'd love to have a Mercedes convertible at the price of a Ford Mustang. Unfortunately, Mercedes isn't too keen on selling me a $90,000 car at $20,000. Of course, we wouldn't say that. But and a Ford Mustang is not $20,000. It's much more expensive than that. The point here is it's fine for people to ask. I don't think it means anything about them or about you. We've been taught to ask for what we want, but just because they ask doesn't mean that they need that discount. It doesn't mean that you have to honor that discount. And so I love the cleanliness of it's out of integrity for me to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that as well. And I think something that's, I don't know if problem's the right word, but something that's a bit of a challenge in the yoga space is I feel like, yoga teachers sometimes approach sales from a lack mindset. And so not only is it like, okay, well, you can't afford it, so I'll just do it cheaper. It's like, well, at least I have customers then.
Sure.
And I think that that's one of the things that's kind of challenging because then, say my rates are normally $60 for a 1-hour session, but we negotiate down to 30, which is not that much more than a drop-in class. And then they tell their friends that they're getting yoga for $30 an hour privately. And their friends are like, what? I'm paying this teacher $100. Like I'm getting ripped off. When really it's kind of like, I'm the one that's kind of devaluing the yoga as a whole because I didn't stand my ground not doing that, which is, it's tough. I guess I'm curious, like with the sales, if you're new at this or you're building a new business, how do you kind of approach pricing and selling not from lack mentality?
So one of the hardest things to do, it really is. It is one of the hardest things to do. And my answer is so harsh here. And I've tried to come up with a different one, but this is the truth. You cannot approach running a business, making money, selling from a lack mindset because like attracts like or lack attracts lack. So that's all you're going to hear. So you have to find a way to fill in the gaps until your business can pay you what you need to be paid. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what that's, for me, going back to a pharmaceutical sales job at the time. I don't know if that's getting a side job. I don't know if that's teaching 20 clients at $30 rather than 4 clients at $100 in the beginning to get my name out there. Like I said, I worked with 100 people for free and gave 300 people free access to sales school. That wasn't discounting. That was to get my name out there. So I think that there are lots of different strategies here, but you have to close the gap on the lack mentality or it keeps haunting you. And I don't know. I'm sure you could do energetic work as well on how to overcome that. But I think it's a very valid point, one that we don't talk enough about. And I think that, what I did when I got super grabby and like I said, I blew through $100,000 in savings. And so I started interviewing for pharmaceutical sales jobs again. I was like, okay, I'm not quitting. I'm not giving up, but I have to get out of this mentality of I need to sign this next client or else, And so, my story is kind of crazy because I interviewed for pharmaceutical sales jobs again. I was like, okay, I'll get back up and start working at 3 a.m. or doing what I have to do. I got offered a pharmaceutical sales job. The next day, I called to accept it, and the hiring manager said, we're on a hiring freeze, so we'll call you back in about 3 months. You're our first person to hire when the hiring freeze goes away. 3 months later, he called me back, and my business had taken off.
I love that. That's amazing.
And I'm not naive enough to say that's what'll happen for everybody if you start, looking for jobs or whatever. That just happened to be my story. And I'm extremely thankful to the universe, to God, to whoever that it happened that way. I worked my rear off in those 3 months. Like I was like, okay, great. I have interviewed. I've got a job offer. I know we're going to be okay in 3 months. Money will start coming in one way or another. I've got 3 months to go all in. And by gosh, I did.
Do you feel like knowing that job was there in 3 months helped to sell from a place of not lack mentality? So you're not yeah. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that this is such a big thing. And it's something that I've experienced in my own life. And I did a lot of personal inner work with my money story and my relationship with money early 2018. And I noticed big shifts when I became more open to money. It's like money started flowing. And yes, I'm a yoga teacher, but I'm not super, super woo-woo. Like I'm more into the business, the analytical. I like things that make sense to me that are tangible. And so I was kind of like, this is weird that this is happening, but also makes so much sense because I shifted the entire way I was thinking about money. So when I hopped on a call with a potential client, it wasn't in the back of my head, okay, if I charge this much and they sign up for this long, that gives me this much more cash. I was just super present with the call because I was I don't really need for them to work with me.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a huge difference. And that's so hard It's so hard when you're like, I quit my job. I'm following my dream. I'm going to be an example for my baby girl. And now I'm broke. Like, that's hard. It's hard. It's hard. And I didn't want to go interview for jobs. I didn't. I hated that drive into downtown Chicago. I didn't want the job. But in hindsight, wow, everything changed for me then.
Right. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And so getting out of lack mentality is going to be an important part of this sales process then. And then I guess it's just like figuring out how, like what you need to do from a personal standpoint to make sure that you can like talk to a potential private client without having that inner dialogue of like, I can't pay my rent if this person doesn't sign with me type thing.
It's a bad place to be in.
Yeah.
It's a bad place to be in.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah. Big stuff there. So once we're doing the process of, so once we've, kind of presented our offering or service and somebody says like, okay, cool. Like, let me have a think about it. And you're like, okay, cool. Can I grab your email address so that I can keep in touch with you? What are some ways to follow up like authentically and integrally? Because I think that this is something that people struggle with as well. Like, I think everyone can probably relate to somebody like sliding into their DMs like, hey, have you thought about this thing? And you're like, oh God, I got to deal with this now. Maybe it's something you want, maybe it's something you don't. But how do you kind of follow up without being like that pushy person?
Well, the first thing is to ask yourself how you want to be dealt with. So, right, like if you're like, oh, have you thought about this when you see the DM and you're like, I hate that now I've got to deal with this, then let's don't do it that way. So look at when you've been followed up with and you were like, oh, that's a really nice follow-up, or, oh, yeah, that's really cool. So the first thing I would do, and there's some statistics to show this, as soon as you can, post-sales call, send an email that thanks them for their time, thanks them for their interest, and enjoyed talking to you. Let me know if you have any questions. Research shows, and this is nearly impossible, especially for yoga teachers because you're in a studio, but research shows if you can follow up within 9 minutes, and again, that's hard, 9 minutes of hanging up the call, you are statistically more likely to close 75% more sales. 9 minutes is hard for a yoga teacher. But so follow up within the first 24 hours and just thank them. Thanks for your time. Let me know if you have questions. Love chatting with you. You can also reiterate what you talked about, just to recap so you have it in writing. Private sessions are $1 million and we can do those on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. Let me know if you have any questions. I want to help you make the best decision for you at this time. The next thing is to check in 3 days later. Hey, Amanda, you crossed my mind today. Or maybe after you see them at yoga, right? I saw you in class and that made me remember that I just wanted to follow up with you and see if I can answer any questions for you about private yoga lessons. The last time we spoke, you were going to go think about it. I remember that you wanted to do private yoga lessons because whatever. You're the type of person I love working with. Let me know what questions I can answer for you. So rather than, hey, have you given any more thought about it? Let's ask them some different questions. Can I help you? What questions do I have? How can you serve them as they make this decision? So it's approaching the follow-up from a completely different place and asking different questions.
Right. And so it's not necessarily with the, I guess it's like the intention is to like ultimately sign them on as a client, or to have them work with you, but it's not like approaching it like, hey, have you thought about doing this thing with me? It's more like coming from a place of like, do you have questions? How can I help you?
Yeah. So when you approach it from the place of, hey, do you have questions? Let's get going. That's about you. Customers don't care about you. They care about themselves. Even as lovely as you may be, they care about what you can do for them. And so if they're going to be paying you their time and their money, they dang well care about what you can do for them. So when you approach it from the place of, hey, got any questions? Let's go. Got an opening. Especially in the beginning, people are like, no, you're not going to push me into this. So here's the thing. So research shows that it takes 7 to 10 touches with a business before someone decides to purchase from you. 7 to 10. Follow-ups are one of those touches. A follow-up is meant to progress the sales conversation and eventually lead to a yes. A follow-up, very, very rarely do you get a yes on the first follow-up, but you can. But by the time you get to 3 follow-ups, you should start to hear yes. So again, you're just separating yourself from the rest of the competition, especially in the yoga field. How many yoga teachers are going to take the time to have a conversation, follow up via email 24 hours later, check in 3 days later, check in one more time, and be of service? How can I help? What questions do you have? By doing that, you have separated yourself from everybody else they've talked to.
Right. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I'm curious with that, if somebody's like just not responding, like, so say somebody doesn't respond to the first follow-up, would you still go ahead with the second follow-up?
100%. So maybe the person's sick. Maybe the person went to Hawaii. Maybe the person bought a new car and is out riding around with her top down, letting the wind blow through his or her hair. So what tends to happen is we go into the story of, well, why are they not following up? And they must not want it. And you know what? Life happens. Maybe it went to spam. Maybe they missed it. Maybe they forgot. So rather than go into the story, let's be of service and just check in. Hey, just checking in. You crossed my mind today. What questions do you have? That sort of thing. There's nothing about that has to be icky, sleazy, slimy, or pushy. But just because somebody didn't respond, we don't need to make that mean they're telling us to go away. But we often do.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can relate to that 100%. Like,
can I tell a quick story about that?
Yeah, of course.
Of course, what are you going to say when I'm like, can I tell a quick story about that? No, Kendrick, you can't. Sorry, that was a weird question. So one of my sales idols, his name is Bob Burg, B-U-R-G, and he's a New York Times bestselling author. And before I started this business, my pharmaceutical sales manager in Chicago had us read one of his books called Go Givers Sell More. And this was before I ever knew I was going to start a business. So fast forward, 6, 7 years later, I guess it was 6 years later. No, it's longer than that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Fast forward 8 years later, Bob Burg emailed me out of the blue. And I was so taken back that this is this year, was so taken back that Bob Burg even knew who I was, that I was like, I don't know how to respond to this. Well, then I forgot to respond. I know that's crazy because you're like, wait a minute, Kendrick, one of your sales idols emailed you. You got excited about it and then you forgot. Yep, I forgot. And so what Bob Burg did was the best thing ever. You know, he could have gone into the story of, well, she's too busy, or she thinks she's so high and mighty, or she whatever. He was like, hey, Bob Burg again, just checking in to see if you got my last email, whatever. I know things sometimes go to spam. And I literally was like, oh, thank you, Lord, that this man emailed me again, because I forgot to email him back. So again, he could have gone into the story of, well, who does she think she is? Or she didn't respond. She must not know who I am. Or he didn't. He was just like, hey, just checking in. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I believe it or not, it completely slipped my mind. And now Bob Burg is one of my friends. Like, we're colleagues. I helped him launch something. The point here is, don't go into the story. Just think, what would help this person move forward?
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. And I think too, I feel like I've had personal situations on the side of like being sold to, where I've experienced like both sides of it. I've had the side of, maybe ignoring it because I'm not that interested, which usually comes from like a cold pitch for something versus like somebody asking me for my contact information and me saying yes, which I feel like is a very big differentiation to begin with. It's like a warm lead versus a cold lead. But I've also had this situation where like, my normal way of making sure that I follow up fell through the cracks and I missed something, or I was like, I need to think about this before I respond. And then I got busy and that sort of thing. And having a follow-up is really nice. So yeah, I think that that's a good thing to remember when we're sitting in the seat of like, am I being annoying? And knowing that like, as long as you are not sending something that you feel like you'd be annoyed by, that it actually is a really good thing to send that.
Yeah. And the other thing I will say too is give yourself permission when you're on the other side of the chair, give yourself permission to say no. So give yourself permission to say, so again, as you're sitting in the other side of the chair, let the person off the hook and say, you know what, Amanda, thank you so much. At this time, personal yoga lessons are not a fit for me. Thanks. Or at this time, Kendrick, sales school is not a fit for me. And say no. you don't have to drag people along. Not that that's what we're doing, because we usually don't want to hurt feelings, or we're not sure, or we're whatever. But if we can sort of clean those transactions up when we are the buyer rather than the seller, I feel like that sort of reciprocates on the other end, where people are like, actually, no, this is the wrong fit for me. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Love talking to you. Let's move on to who it is the right fit for.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's, and I don't know if this is just something that's like I'm up in Canada, I'm Canadian, and I feel like Canadian culture in general is like a little more passive than American culture. But I feel like it is kind of interesting because I think people will kind of string you along sometimes. Like, I feel like a maybe is not a yes or a no to me. So it's like a maybe is still somebody who's like potentially could be a client. But I think that, I don't know, sometimes it feels like people are just like pushing you along without actually saying no. And for me, 100%, I just prefer to like have somebody say, hey, it's not going to be a good fit right now. But yeah, it is kind of interesting culturally, just an observation that I've had just between working with Canada and the US. So for my Canadian listeners, something to keep in mind.
There you go.
And also don't be that person.
Yeah, exactly. That was the point. Like, I think if energetically we can, kind of give that gift to other people when we've been like, oh, actually, I'm not interested in this right now. There are different ways to say that. I feel like it sort of reciprocates in our own business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think, at what point do you consider somebody a no? Is it like when you get that no, like will you work on that person until you actually get a no from them?
That's a really good question. I think it depends. So I think that as long as you need business or want business, then I would keep following up with people, even if they said no. So if it was a no in January, doesn't mean it's a no in July. So you could check in with them. I think if somebody says, nope, not right now, terrible time, don't email me again. Yeah, they're probably off my list. I've never gotten that before in my life, just so you know. But I think that the goal, again, is to keep the conversation moving forward. So if somebody is a hard no and you've done the tools for overcoming objections, then move that follow-up in and check in again in 3 months. Hey, Amanda, you crossed my mind today. I remember we spoke in January and you were thinking about taking private yoga lessons. I just wondered how you're doing. How's it going? Are you finding ways to add more peace and flow and flexibility into your life? Just check in and let me know how it's going. See, there's no pitch there. What we're trying to do is re-engage the conversation. So I think it depends. There comes a time when you're so booked that you don't follow up like that. But in the beginning, it's a great way to continue to keep people on your radar. So I think it depends on what the previous conversations have been, but I think that you can move the follow-up out 3 months or so and check in again and see where people are.
Yeah, definitely. I think, that makes sense. And I love the way of framing it is like, you're not like sliding into their inbox or their DMs with a pitch kind of out of nowhere that might put them like, have their backs up or anything like that. It's just like, hey, I'm just checking in with you and seeing like how things are going, which I think people really like people like to be cared for. And I think it's important to remember as yoga teachers, like it feels really good when somebody remembers your name or remembers something about something in your life, or, they haven't come to class for a while and you reach out and contact them. Like, I think that feels really good to feel like somebody actually thinks about you.
Everybody wants that. Everybody. People like to do business with people they like. And so be likable. Make people feel valued.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. You mentioned objections. How do you handle some of the major objections? I know we've talked about the I can't afford it one, but what are some of the other biggest objections that you hear? I guess time is probably one.
Yeah, time. I need to talk about it with my spouse. Those are the three. Don't have time. Money. Need to talk about it with my spouse. And we use the same. So again, there's 7 tools for overcoming objections, but we use the same formula. Thank you for sharing that with me. I understand how it feels to not be sure that you have the time to develop to private lessons. And then you can insert one of the 7 tools. So the one I role modeled for you all was discount it. You do a good job of getting here or a great job of getting here to class. You remind me of a student who actually was in a similar situation a year ago where she wanted to start taking private lessons but wasn't sure she had the same time. She decided that she was worth the commitment And on the other side of that, now she says private lessons are one of the best things she's ever done for herself because she has more peace, she has more whatever, she has more whatever the person is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So take some time and think about it as you look at your schedule, and then let me know what questions you have. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have to help you, make the best decision for you about if this is the right time. So we've essentially discounted the objection. That tool is called discounting the objection, because what we're saying is other people have been in this same situation and found a way to do it. And you can do that with time, you can do that with money, you can do it with any objection. But we're not saying, well, other people have found a way to do it with quite so harshly. We're seed planting that, yep, I get it. And a lot of busy people find a way to do it, and you can too, without saying that.
Right. So it's almost like thinking about what you would directly say and then rephrasing it in a way that's like a lot softer, a lot gentler, and a lot nicer.
Yeah. So we have 7. So like there's 7 tools for overcoming objections that I teach, and they're all kind of like that. So there's discount objections, expert recommendations, let them off the hook, head on, and every different one has a little bit different level of aggressiveness. So some are super aggressive, some are not aggressive at all, so that we can meet you where you are with what I call your sales guardrail. So if sometimes being aggressive feels like helping, great, then I can use this tool. Actually, I don't want to be aggressive at all ever. Great, then you can use these 3 tools. And so rather than saying there's one universal way to overcome objections, which is what a lot of people say, let's make this process fluid and flexible and meet you where you are as a communicator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that all makes a ton of sense. And I feel like it's just really comes from like what you said at the beginning, like shifting the mentality around it. Because I think that, if you think of the sales as being bad and icky, it's easy to hear all of this as like, oh, that's annoying, that's aggressive, that's too much. But I think if you're thinking of it from the perspective of like, hey, I'm going to go in there and help people, then it just changes like its entire tone.
Yep, exactly. It does. And then you can check in with yourself. Does this feel like helping, or does this feel like pushing? Does this feel like leaning in or leaning back? Does this feel like I'm being of service, or does this feel like I'm trying to be sleazy and sneak one in? And then adjust based on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Yeah. No, I love all of that. I want to be mindful of your time. So last question I'm kind of curious about, and I know there's lots of like softwares and programs and CRMs that you can get for like bigger databases, but do you have any tips for people who are kind of just starting out to keep track of, all their clients and when they need to follow up, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. So I have tried everything, because this is inevitably a question we get every year in sales school. And here's my answer: Google spreadsheets. We even have a sheet that a student, it's actually our teacher's assistant in sales school, created that's fantastic. It's got this little formula that she created that kind of auto-populates when you need to follow up with people next. But that's what we ran our business on when we were doing personal outreach and follow-ups, was a Google sheet. And this is how you do it. So basically vertically down the Google sheet, even if you hate spreadsheets, this is the easiest way to do it. Vertically down the spreadsheet, you list your customers' names. Horizontally across the spreadsheet, so in column A goes your customers' names. In column B goes a Google Doc link with all your communication. So let's say that I have had 4 email exchanges back and forth with you in my Gmail account. Literally, I copy and paste all of those emails into one Google Doc. You link that in the spreadsheet. So when you click that link, you have the history of the conversation right there. Oh, look, on January, I followed up with them. March 1st, she said she was interested but never paid. So you can see what the communication's been like. And then you can decide how to follow up with them from there. So you can put in column C, vertically down, date of last follow-up. So really, you've got horizontally, you kind of got your tabs, and then vertically down in column A, you've got your names. Column B, you've got your Google link to all your communication. And then in column C, you've got date of last follow-up. That's how we did it. And then we kind of color-coded them.
Amazing. I love that. I love how like simple, straightforward it is. And it's also great to have a free option as well. Cause yeah, I know for yoga teachers starting out, it's like, it'd be great to have like Salesforce or something like that, but that's just an added expense that I feel like you really don't need at that point with your business. So
we don't even use that. I mean, yeah, it's great, but we don't even use that.
yeah.
You know, like Google spreadsheets work. And I don't even love spreadsheets. And they work. I like clean and I like easy. And lots of times, and I don't know about with Salesforce specifically, but lots of times those things, those paid versions have so many options, and it's great, except it's confusing as all get out. I don't need that. I just need to be able to see who to follow up with, when's the last time I talked to them, and what's the last thing we said to each other.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. It's like we don't need to make something complicated that's not complicated.
Exactly.
No, I love that. That's amazing. Thank you so much for this conversation, Kendrick. It's been awesome chatting with you. I could seriously pick your brain for like 3 more hours, but I'm sure you have a busy day with other people to talk to. If anyone wants to find out more about Sales School or just learn about more about you and your offerings, where can people go to find you?
Yeah, thank you so much. I have enjoyed talking so much as well. This has been, I love it. I love it. I love it. It's super easy to find me, Kendrick Shope, SHOPE.com, or on social media, Kendrick Shope, and you can find links to anything you want. I will say, excuse me, my voice cracked. If you're kind of like, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about this follow-up stuff, or I want to learn a little bit more about this, if you go to the tab on our website called Authentic Selling, there is tons of free training on there. You don't even have to opt in for it. So there are tons of trainings. There are videos, there are podcasts, and on podcast, all we do is just answer people's questions. So you can find tons of free resources there to sort of dive in if it's something you want to start playing with.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I will definitely make sure that there's links to all of that in the show notes for listeners. And yeah, thank you again for your time today. This has been a really wonderful conversation.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much. And, you know, for anybody out there who's like, can I? Yes, you can. I totally believe in you. It's what I tell my daughter every day. I believe in you, and I believe in your business, and I believe in your ability to change the world.
I love it. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. Those are great words of wisdom to leave listeners with.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right, I hope that you guys enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Kendrick Shope and are hopefully feeling a little bit more inspired when it comes to your own authentic selling process and how to start getting yourself out there. And I hope that you understand that, you know, one of the reasons that I think that this is really important and why I'm really passionate about this is that, you know, if people don't know about the things that we're offering, we can't keep sharing them. And we need to be able to have sustainable businesses and careers in order to share our gifts and our services and our teachings with the world. So this stuff is really, really valuable. And I love the way that Kendrick talks about it on a more authentic selling level. So if you still have more questions, definitely make sure you head on over to her website. It's kendrickshope.com. And I'll have a link for that on the show notes. So that's at mbomyoga.com. As always, you can find all the notes, links, all that good stuff there. You can find all of the resources and access to all of my stuff on the website. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And of course, you can join the private Facebook community at Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, send me an email at info@mbomyoga.com. I always love to hear from you guys. And otherwise, I will see you next week. Thanks so much for listening. Namaste.